Hey guys, this is Martin. I've been a dating and relationship coach for 17 years, and today we're going to talk about why your girlfriend or wife isn't giving you sex. All right, now first of all, that topic is a bit of a misnomer because in any individual relationship, there can be a lot of reasons why she isn't giving you sex. But we're going to talk about the one thing that you can definitely do something about very easily, and if you did something about this, then the rest of the problems would be a lot easier to solve, okay? And that is, how many orgasms are you giving your girl when you fuck her? That is the beginning part of the question. All right, that is if you're like, well, I don't know if she can have orgasms. Sometimes she does, sometimes she doesn't. It's like, if you ordered a pizza and it only came some of the time, you'd stop ordering from that place, wouldn't you? Yes, you would. When you ordered the pizza, you want it to show up every time. And it's the same thing. When you have sex with your girl, yes, it's true that for women, there's the emotional connection and, the feeling of being close to you and, there's all this stuff, right? Yes, okay, I agree that women value that stuff. But how many orgasms is she having when you fuck her? That is the question. You got to sort that. You got to have at least one reliable way to bring your woman to orgasm. Now, there's all this stuff out there about how, sometimes women, on Cosmo, sometimes it's not your day to hit the big O or whatever. As far as I'm concerned, it's total bullshit. How many times have you heard a woman say, I pulled out my vibrator, but I couldn't have an orgasm? It's like, that's not how it works. If she can have an orgasm, it's just you didn't give her one. So you need to learn how to give her one. That is the key. Now, the thing is that people have a sort of an incorrect understanding. And this goes back to the video I was talking about, how people think they know what they like, but they don't really know what they like. It's the same thing with orgasms. I talk about this in when I used to teach the sex seminar. I would say, could you tell a woman how to give you a blowjob so that you could bust? And guys would say, well, kinda, right? Kinda. You can kinda, but not really. You can't explain to a woman how to give you a blowjob to make you bust. You can't explain it because it's about, how she uses her jaw, how she uses her tongue, the amount of suction, there's the positioning of the lips, right? There's a lot of small nuances going on there. Now, what you can do is go, oh, yes, that's good. Yes. Oh, yes. More of that, right? And not so much of that, right? We can feel when it's going in the right direction and when it's not, but we can't explain it to someone. And so in the same way, so for a woman, when she is giving you a blowjob, for example, it is a process of discovery where she is learning how you work and what you respond to. In the same way, and for every guy, it's going to be different. I mean, like, the way I like it is, okay, here's the great. I know some guys, they love a sloppy wet one. They want the saliva dripping down their nutsack. Me, not so much. I'm not into I don't want it to be so messy. But some guys, that is their mark of a great blowjob. For me, not my thing. Okay, so she might be giving you a great blowjob by somebody else's standards. Maybe your ex-boyfriend. Probably don't think about that when it's happening. But, but you can be aware. Okay, now, on the other, so in the same way, when you are having sex with a woman, you have to understand that you don't know what's going to get her off. And she doesn't really know either. She might think she knows. It's like, if I shoot the water on my clit at exactly this angle for, 3.5 minutes, then that works. She might have some method, right? In the same way that most guys, for masturbating, they can get themselves off every time, right? But that doesn't mean that's the only way you can get off. That's just the only way that that works. And the same goes for her. She might know a way that works. And that's your first task, is for you to figure out one way that you can get her to orgasm. One reliable way that you can get her to orgasm. Now, typically, that's going to be through some kind of clitoral stimulation. Typically, right? Whether that's with tongue, but it might be a combination, right? It might be a combination of licking her clit while fingering her in a certain way, or maybe it's fingering her clit while licking a nipple, or going back and forth, or maybe it's not licking. Maybe you have to do some elaborate, Ouija board patterns on her nipple. I mean, you got to figure it out. And the thing is that in the beginning of the relationship is the great time to figure it out, because she doesn't expect you to know, and generally in the beginning people are going to be more forgiving. They don't, when you have a new girl and she gives you what you consider to be a shitty blowjob, you don't go, what the fuck is this shit? This bitch, why is she giving me such a shitty blowjob? It's like, it's her first time giving you a blowjob. You don't expect it to not be shitty. You're just excited that she's giving it to you, right? So, so in the same way, when you're starting out with a woman in the beginning, she doesn't expect you to know how to get her off. So the fact that you're kind of exploring and experimenting and figuring it out, that's the best time to do it. Because by the time you've been with the woman for 6 months, a year, 3 months, it's like you're supposed to know. You're supposed to know already. Okay, so that's really the key. Now, if you're late into your relationship, then you need to go back and think about every time that she's had an orgasm that you know of, and you have to try and connect the patterns. Now, maybe you're thinking, oh, well, every time it's, during intercourse. And it's like, okay, well, that's hard to manage, right? Because during intercourse, it's like you have to manage your own arousal level so things don't finish too quickly while also giving her an orgasm. And I don't know if other people have noticed this, but I often feel that, when the girl's approaching orgasm, the vagina gets tighter. So there's this thing where it's like, oh no, I've got to, I've got to control my own orgasm as it's getting harder to control mine as it's getting to the point where she's likely to reach hers. So it's, it's a much more delicate balance. So it's much better to be able to do it with your fingers, with your tongue, with a combination of the two. And you never really know what that thing is going to be. That's going to be the exact way that it works. So, ideally the less effort. I mean, maybe it's just from licking her nipples. Or maybe it's just from licking her ear. I had a girl who, the first way that I got her to orgasm was by licking her ears. And it was just, that's what I was doing, and it worked. And, she'd never experienced that before, but I guess, for whatever reason, I was able to do that. So you just never know, but you got to pay attention. Now, here's one of the things that I do early on, the first time I have sex with a girl. So during the time that I'm having sex with her and during the foreplay, I'm making mental notes of when I think she had an orgasm, right? So it's like, okay, maybe it was there, maybe it was there, maybe it was there, maybe it was there, right? So this is the first time I've had sex with her, right? And so afterwards, I'll say, oh, it's too bad you didn't have any orgasms. And she'll go, no, I did. Because if I say to her, oh, how many orgasms did you have? Now I'm putting pressure on her to potentially lie to me. Because maybe she has to say, oh, no, baby, it was great. Because she's really liking you right now, right? So she wants you to feel good, and she doesn't want to seem like she's trouble. And so because of that, she could feel some pressure to lie to you. But by saying like, oh, baby, I'm sorry you didn't have any orgasms, she's thinking, oh, no, I did, right? Because she can certainly tell you. And you go, oh, really? Oh, when? And then she'll say, when you did this, when you did this, when you did this. And then you can then rewind to that point in time, and you can go, oh, right, okay, I was doing that, and this is how she looked when she had orgasms. And this is how she looked when she had an orgasm. And so you can connect the dots. And so now you have a mental model for what she looks like when she has an orgasm. And two, you have some known ways that lead to orgasm. And so the next time you have sex with her, you can roll those same things out and see if they work in the same way. Now, they don't always work in the same way exactly, right? Because at different arousal stages, we can be more or less responsive to different things. Like at a low arousal level, some things can feel ticklish, but when we're at a higher arousal level, then they'll be sexually stimulating, right? Okay, so that's what you need to do in the beginning of the relationship. Now, if you're not in the beginning of the relationship, then you can still do the same mental thing of looking back at the sexual encounters you've had and try and pinpoint what are the elements that created the best sexual experiences for your woman, and then you want to optimize the times you do have sex for those things. Because what the cycle you want to break is, as far as I'm concerned, is you don't want to be in a cycle of sex is a reward for doing other things. Sex should be its own reward for both of you. She should want to have sex because she likes sex with you. She shouldn't be using it as a tool to control and manipulate you. Now, having said that, this is partially about a female's frame. Some women just have that frame. They have a frame that sex is not for the purpose of sex. Sex is, you want a woman whose idea is that sex is a fun activity that she enjoys. Because some people don't really have that. It's like, for some people, their idea is sex is something you do to get other things in a relationship. And so if you have a relationship with a woman like that, you're in a tough spot because from her perspective, it's already transactional. And for my, so that's something that I look for pretty early on, is I look for a woman who, for her, sex isn't transactional. She enjoys sex in and of itself, but she wants to do sex with people who offer other things as well, who offer more than just sex. That's kind of the ideal. Okay. So if you have a woman who, from her perspective, sex is primarily just a transactional thing, as I said, that's tough. You're gonna have a really tough time. Now, it can be sometimes that women have that frame because they've never really had enjoyable sex. And so by giving her enjoyable sex, that frame can shift. But once again, this is something that you should be figuring out early in a relationship, not later. Let me see. I think I covered quite a lot of things, but I don't know. Was there anything else?
Well, there's a lot of guys in sexless relationships, or the woman is decreasing the amount of sex that the guy is getting because maybe she's pissed off with him.
Right. Okay. Well, let's first talk about this. I mean, generally speaking, guys want sex more than women. And so you automatically have a problem when you have a monogamous relationship where there is likely to be a sexual deficit for the male. Like, that's almost invariably going to happen. And so this is one of the reasons why I'm very hesitant to agree to an exclusive relationship. Because if you agree to an exclusive relationship, sexually exclusive relationship, and you have a sexual deficit, now you are, one, unhappy with her because you're not getting enough, and two, she is expecting that to give you more sex, you should do more for her. And it's like, okay, you have to do more shit just so that you can get to your baseline. It's like, that's not good. That's not a good dynamic. So I think, that's a really bad dynamic for a relationship in general. So this is exactly the reason why I really don't like the idea of agreeing to exclusivity. It's like, okay, we can be sexually exclusive or not, as I said, I can be sexually exclusive, but I don't want to agree to it, because if you agree to it, now, as they say, she has you by the balls. But if you don't agree to it, even if you're not actually going elsewhere, the idea that you could go elsewhere means that there is some pressure on her to make sure that you're satisfied. Because remember, she's going to be unhappy anyway about something. And so if she's going to be unhappy anyway, it's much better if you're already happy. Because if you're already happy, you're in a better position to try and make her happy. Whereas if you're unhappy and she's unhappy, that's rough. That's really rough, because neither of you feels an incentive to put in more effort, because you're like, well, I'm unhappy because you're not doing X, Y, and Z. And they're like, well, I'm unhappy because you're not doing A, B, and C. And it's like, okay, well, who's going to make the first move? Well, generally, it's probably the guy. And the reason it's generally the guy is because the stuff that she wants from you are things that society thinks are good things. And the things that you want from her are things that you're not supposed to speak about in society. It's like, She can say, oh, I want a ring that costs $10,000, and that's totally acceptable. But you can't say, I want to have anal 3 times a month. People go, you're a disgusting pig. And it's like, well, she wants a $10,000 ring. Like, why is that okay? And it's like, well, it's just arbitrary. It's just the way society is. And so that's why generally the female's desires are more likely to be fulfilled than men's, kind of automatically. There's just more, there's not really a societal incentive for a lot of your needs, especially your sexual ones, to be fulfilled. Whereas, in her case, a lot of her needs and desires are, are things that society believes she should have, and society would push you to give her, and that there's real social pressure around. There's no social pressure around her pleasing you sexually in the way that you want, but there's a lot of social pressure around you committing to her, you being sexually exclusive with her, you taking her out to celebrate, the holidays and Valentine's Day, and buying her flowers, and getting an engagement ring, becoming engaged, marrying, right, having kids. There's societal pressure on all that stuff. But most of the things that you want from her, there's not much societal pressure around them. In fact, there's even less now than there used to be, because the narrative now is that, women shouldn't have to do anything for a man. Which is just ridiculous, because obviously men have to do lots of stuff for women, and we don't complain about it. We just go, yeah, that's kind of how it works. Like, you got a job, you got to show up and work. If you don't show up and work, you don't get paid. And it's the same thing in relationships. You got to show up and you got to do what is necessary for that relationship to be a good relationship. And if you don't show up, then you don't get a good relationship. So, I know you ladies like this idea of not having to do anything, but it's just not realistic. Now, ideally, you find a partner who the things they want you to do are things that you enjoy doing, right? That's the key, and that's why we talk about preferences so much, or why I talk about preferences so much, and finding someone who's complementary to you. So if you're in a sexless marriage or a sexless relationship, why are you even in this relationship at all? Okay, I understand if you're married and there's kids and these sorts of things. And, and when you live that kind of lifestyle, it's very difficult to get some strange, but if you are, if it's your girlfriend or something, why are you with a girl who doesn't think it's important to satisfy your sexual needs? That you got to really think about that. It's like, here's something that's important to you, and here's a person that you're with who she claims you're important to her, and you tell her, hey, this sex thing is a real problem for me. I'm really unhappy about it. I don't feel satisfied. And if her attitude is, so what? This is not a person you should be with. And it's not only about sex. If it was about health, if you said to her, look, I think that you need to drink less, or I think you need to smoke less, or you need to lose weight, you have cholesterol problems, whatever it is. If you say, look, this is really important to me that you do something about this, and they don't want to do something about it, this is not someone you can have a relationship with. So that's what I would say, is that's really what you should be considering, is why are you with this person who doesn't really value you enough to put in the time and effort to care about what you think is important? Obviously, with marriage, it's a lot more complicated than it is if you're just dating. And I think when you're with someone long term, there can be other reasons. Like there can be medical reasons that maybe sex is really challenging, or why she doesn't really desire sex. But once again, I think that you need to have a partner who understands that this is a problem and wants to solve the problem. That's really the key, is like, if they won't acknowledge it as a problem, or if they just think of it as your problem, well, once again, you can't be with the person like that. It's like, if they think your problem is really important and they understand it and they want to do something about it, but maybe they say, okay, look, I can't do something about it this month. All right, that could be possible. They said, look, you know what? I'm swamped with work, or we just had the baby, and I'm so exhausted, and I understand it's really hard for you, and can we talk about this in a month or in 3 months or something like that. And if there's some kind of timeline, I think it's kind of okay, because the point is they're not ignoring the problem or minimizing it or saying that it's not a real problem or something that needs to be dealt with. They are saying that it is important, but there are other things right now that are more important. Now you could say, oh, but that could become a pattern where there's other things that are more important. Yes, that could be. And that is something to look out for, where you go, okay, it's been a year and there's always been something else that's more important. And it's like, okay, look, I understand that this is not the most important thing. I understand that my sexual pleasure is not the most important thing, but I need to do something about it. Otherwise, our relationship isn't going to work. And I know it's like embarrassing, I guess you could say that, right? It's kind of embarrassing as a guy to, essentially be begging your woman for sex. And it's not a good dynamic. It really isn't. And so that's why I would say that you don't want to be in the position of begging her for sex. You want to be in a position of having a conversation about it and being able to say to her, look, this is a problem for me. In the same way that you could sit down and say, hey, you know what? I think that you've been overspending. You look at the budget and you say, look, I think you've been overspending and I think we need to do something about this, because if you look at our finances, and she should be able to look at that with you and go, yeah, you're right. There's a problem here. What can we do? How can we change things? How can we modify how we're spending so that things can be on track? In the same way, it should be like that with sex. Now, I know that a lot of times these conversations are very emotional, and she can start crying, and this can be a problem. You bring up an issue with the woman, and she feels bad that this is an issue, and then she starts to cry and feel emotional and guilty and all these things. And it's like, okay, yes, I understand you have all these emotions and you feel very guilty and you're sad about it. It's like, but look, I'm trying to make this relationship work, and that's why we're talking about this. This isn't about me trying to make you feel bad or trying to leave you or trying to guilt trip you. This is about me trying to have a good relationship with you where I want to stick around and where we can both be happy. So, let's just talk about it. Now, it is true that talking about things in a relationship often doesn't solve the problem. So I don't want you to think that I believe that just talking is going to solve the problem. But I do think that talking is an important part of, or can be an important part of solving the solution. If you've already done everything you can do. Now, here's another thing. A lot of times, maybe the reason she doesn't want to have sex with you are things that you could do but you aren't aware of, and she doesn't want to tell you. This can be a real challenge, where women, they don't want to hurt someone's feelings. So because they don't want to hurt your feelings, they don't tell you, and instead they just hurt your feelings all the time by not fucking you. It's like, So one of the things that you can do is look back at times when things were good between you sexually, and look back at those times and think, okay, what was going on at that time where things were good sexually, or what were the circumstances that led to a good sex life? And maybe there are things like, when we were on vacation, when we didn't have kids and we had more alone time together, and you can look at sort of the patterns that led to sex happening, and you can think about how you can go about setting things up to recreate that. So that's another thing. But it's a really difficult problem, and a lot of times one of the issues is that by the time that you're really trying to deal with it, it's too late. In that the woman is too checked out of the relationship to care. And that can happen. A lot of guys, I talk about how your woman will never be really happy. If you get the sense that your woman is really happy, and when I say that, I mean, she's never complaining. Most guys think if she's never complaining, that's a good thing. That is not a good thing, because she's almost certainly has things she's unhappy about, but she's just not communicating that to you. And oftentimes they communicate it to you because they are invested in the relationship. And when they stop being invested in the relationship, they stop communicating those things. Because they just think, you know what, who cares? I don't care. I'm just, they're just so done. But they might continue with the pattern of the relationship because it's easier than getting a divorce or breaking up or something like that. So, a lot of these, you can't let these things slide into bad patterns. When you're in a relationship, you need to watch the dynamics very closely from the beginning and do your best to make sure that negative dynamics don't creep into the relationship. And negative dynamics can be things like staying home and getting drunk every night together. I mean, you do it together. It's like, it's good to do that sometimes, but you don't want to do that all the time. You need to incorporate other things into the dynamic of how you two spend time together, right? So that's what I mean about watching the dynamics closely. Anyway, I don't know. I think I covered a lot. Is there anything else you can think of that I should mention or bring up? Okay. All right. Well, questions, comments below. Like and subscribe. And, don't be a dick in the comments. No dicks in the comments. I hate dicks. Dicks are for the ladies, not for me. See ya.